Hello everyone, this is Turiel D, and today I am playing Duskers, some kind of post-apocalyptic, roguelike, space salvaging game. And today I am going to show you some tactics for how to clear the various vessels that you use your little drone assistants to clear. Duskers is very much a game of risk management. You have to try to make sure you don't put your drones at too much risk while gaining as much as possible in the form of scrap, which is the game's currency. To do this, your drones carry a bunch of different modules. Like there's a gatherer module on my first drone, which can gather scrap from the ground. And on my second drone I have a probe module. This probe module sends out a little probe that can scan individual rooms and detect even more scrap for the first drone to pick up. To make this work optimally, both the probe and the first drone need to have a stealth module. Now probe can be upgraded with stealth for a few units of scrap in the modules menu before you start a mission. Whereas the stealth module for drones is something you can either start the game with sometimes, or you'll have to find it as loot. Drone you'll definitely have to find as loot, or maybe buy it at a trade post. Now when you start a new ship, you will almost always have two rooms which are safe. It could be R6 and R5, R2 and R3, it doesn't really matter. After that there can be all kinds of threats available. Oh, well, we see one there actually. Now, I'm going to activate stealth, and for myself, I've set up an alias for that, which is the Z. Z and enter activates my stealth. Okay, let's wait for my probe to come back and close the door. And now we can turn off stealth and we can safely gather the scrap. That there is a power outlet. And because my ship is carrying a remote power module, rather than me needing drones to go there to power stuff, I can do that from a distance. So I disable remote power in R6 and start it in R3, which will let us flush that enemy out of the airlock. Even if it's not necessary, I prefer to flush enemies out the airlock just so you don't need to worry about them in future if you might, for some reason, want some other drone to come through this area. Now you notice this drone, or rather this probe, isn't actually under my control. It's just going to move between rooms. It sits there, scans, and it moves to whatever other rooms are available. And that means I have to keep closing doors behind me, otherwise the probe is just going to go back and forth and back and forth. And see, it's following the enemy, but I don't actually want it stuck there. Thankfully, probes move faster than enemies, so you can almost always close the door behind them before any enemy makes it back into the room with you. This is one of the main useful elements of stealth. You can sit there in stealth and wait for enemies to pass you by and trap them in rooms where you've already been. Now, done here, you can just move the docking barge back to a different airlock, and exit. We have cleared every room, fully scanned, while using only 2 modules on drones. Now the reason that using few modules is important is, well, what you see here. The stealth and probe have both deteriorated through use, and there's a chance of failure. To repair these modules costs 10 to 12 scrap, so if it takes 5 or 6 missions to get here, you're looking at a cost of using each module of 2 scrap per mission. So the more modules you use, the more scrap you have to be able to get every mission to, well, make a profit. But what if everything doesn't go according to plan? This can happen. So let's look at the room situation. If I had mistimed something or made another mistake that my stealth hadn't worked, and I went through D11 and then D7 to R3, I could have been killed by the creature in there. What would I then have had to do? Firstly, forget entirely about the probe. Probes are cheap to replace, don't worry about it anymore. Close all the doors around it, and the corpse, basically, or the disabled bot, would have been stuck maybe on door D7, meaning that you couldn't close D7. This is where drone number 3 enters into things. Now you'll see in the interface he has a teleport, a lure, and a tow. Eventually we're of course going to want to tow our fallen comrade out, but first we need to get the monster out of there. In this case I would use R5 for that. We know that R5 is clear, so we can safely teleport 3 to R5. We place the lure and we teleport him out again. Now lures have a double functionality. First, they are able to, well, lure enemies, but second, they also work as a kind of sensor. They will send you a message when an enemy has interacted with them. Once we've teleported number 3 back out of the room, we open the door between them. In this case, that's the 11. Now we would soon hear a message, or receive a message from the lure that something had interacted with it, and we could close the 11 again. At that point, we simply flush everything in R5 out, which would hopefully only be the enemy monster. That would leave us safe to dock at A5, or teleport our towing drone in, and manually retracing the steps that drone 1 took them to get there. That is also a big part of the reason why I flush as many enemies as possible out of airlocks. Because you may do something wrong and end up needing to tow poor little drone 1 back to the airlock. Now, thankfully in this case that didn't happen, and we got out of there with some jump fuel and some scrap, which is worth 21 scrap. Whereas on the cost side, we used only 3 modules, the stealth, the probe, and the gatherer. Going by the 2 scrap per module use rule, that's cost us 6 and gained us 21. It's pretty profitable. I hope you enjoyed this particular little tips and tricks video of this method of clearing vessels with as little module use as possible. I'm really enjoying Duskers, so I expect there will be more to follow. See you around. This has been Turiel D.